Tuesday, November 23rd. This is the Common Council meeting, and I'll call the meeting to order. Everybody's present, so we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Item C is the public comment period. At this time, the council president will recognize members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by the council president, persons may address the council first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak? Mr. Pinker.
Good evening, William Pinker, 600 Sycamore. On your agenda this evening is a request to support a statement that Marshfield is a welcoming community. As noted, the city's support would not be a commitment to particular actions or positions in the future. The 50-word statement, with its politically correct buzzwords, is a redundancy. In 2017, the Common Council approved language, 54 words when edited for clarity and continuity, that has essentially the same effect. In the vein of welcoming and embracing diversity, which brings new ideas and perspectives, I suggest the statement before you is a solution in search of a problem, as well as the top of a slippery slope. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other citizen comments? Any other citizen comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item D, approval of the minutes of the November 9th, 2021 meeting. I have a motion from Mr. Hendler. And a second from Mr. Fire. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. And that motion carries unanimous. Item E is staff updates, a report from Marshfield Utilities regarding lead and water by Nick Cum, General Manager of Marshfield Utilities. Nick.
Thank you.
Welcome.
At the last Common Council meeting, I was asked to come forth and provide an update on lead services, specifically talking about some of the bill inserts that we've been providing, and then also some of the private side funding that's been going on. So just got a number of different things here. I'll try to cover it briefly. The EPA requires that the utility test for our lead and copper levels in our drinking water. We passed the testing in 2019, and then in 2020, the DNR decided to require us to test again to get us on the same testing cycle as all the other water utilities in the state. At that time, we did exceed the action level with the 2020 testing. The reason that we didn't pass is that the DNR changed the sample location requirements. In 2019 and before, we were required to test homes that had copper plumbing with lead solder. Then in 2020, along with a lot of the other actions that the governor of the state has done as it relates to lead, they changed the locations and they required us to test homes that had complete lead services. So that's what led to the failure in the testing. As part of the exceedance, they required us to do a number of things. First, we needed to do a lead service inventory, or we needed to determine what we had as far as lead services throughout our system. We needed to begin the process of removing lead from our system as far as services go. And we needed to do a corrosion control study where we're trying to optimize the makeup of the water and the different items that are in it. We were also required to publish education material throughout the year. This includes inserts in our bill. It includes a note that you'll notice on the bottom of every bill since December that indicates that there are some homes that have lead services in our area. And this will continue until we have all the lead removed, or if we substantially test in the future and pass. As far as our lead service inventory, through our research and digging into our historical records and also doing field inventory, we were able to identify 2,411 lead public and private water services. The DNR requires approximately 7% annually, or 168 water services are replaced every year to meet a 15-year cycle. or replacement schedule. This year we began with replacements, and this year we replaced 227. So 168 was the requirement for the year. We replaced 227 of between public and private lead services. And just a reminder, the public portion is the part that the utility owns, if you will, from the road to the curb, or I'm sorry, to the sidewalk generally. And then the private portion is the portion that's owned by a property owner, which is from the back of the curb, usually into the house. A little bit more about private water services. Back in 2016, we did it as part of our AMI project where we were in all the homes, changing out the meters and also doing cross-connection inspections. We determined how many homes had lead services coming into them. And we determined there were approximately 346 private lead services at that time. Since that point in 2016, 166 of the private lead services have been replaced, and that leaves a balance of 99 residential and 81 commercial private lead services still there. Also, since 2016, we've applied for and received a safe drinking water loan with principal forgiveness to remove residential private lead services. These funds can be used by residents to offset the cost and in many cases pay for the entire replacement of the private lead service. We've sent out numerous letters to the property owners, phone calls, and actually did field visits for as many homes as we could to try to encourage individuals to go through this process so that they would get at least their portion of the lead service replaced. And I should note that when a customer comes through and does an application, and the day that they're doing their lead service portion, if the utility side is lead as well, we do replace ours that same day, same process. Just a little bit more about this forgiveness, principal forgiveness loan. The DNR is currently in the process of changing the principal forgiveness program schedule to follow the calendar year. Previously, it's been a little bit more disjointed. So going forward, what will occur is that we apply in January for funds. We'll find out in March if funds are going to be allotted to the community or to the utility for the private side. And then we have for the remainder of the year to basically complete the replacements. The process involves the DNR using a grading system to determine which communities will receive funds. Those with more services or those that maybe have a lead action exceedance similar to ours will grade higher and therefore be more likely to be allotted funds. Another item that can help support the scoring is if a community passes an ordinance. And the essence of the ordinance really is that the private owner would have to replace their service whenever the public side is replaced. So kind of the reverse of what I just said. So if the utility gets to a point where we decide that we're going to replace our service, the ordinance then would make it that the private side would have to replace theirs as well. But keep in mind, as long as we have funds coming in, that's going to help offset any costs that would be to the property owner. And again, that just having that type of ordinance in place is something that would help with the scoring to help ensure that we get funds to help those with private. And it is something that we're looking at bringing back to this body in 2022 for consideration. Customers with questions are encouraged to contact us as it relates to lead services. Those that have access to the internet can visit our website. Under the About Us, we have a section devoted to lead service replacements. In there, you can find information about sources of lead in the drinking water, where it's coming from. There's also an interactive map, which is very useful for customers if they want to figure out what type of service they may have, and that's the public side. And you can go on there and click on the actual property, and it'll bring up a little window that gives the address and then says the status of what the service is. And then we also have a section on frequently asked questions. Customers with lead services can have their water at home tested. The utility will cover the cost of the test, and then the results of the test are provided back to the customer. And we use there's a local and another regional firm that's certified to do testing. It's not something the utility does; it's done by a third party. And then based on those results, we can determine the next steps as far as doing a replacement or getting them education on how they can mediate any issues that they might have. And like I said, there's more information that can be found on our website. I think overall our goal is the complete removal of lead water services in our system. I think as you can contest that the replacement for this first year were positive, we're moving in the right direction. However, we still understand that we have a considerable amount of work in front of us to get them all replaced. So that's all I had for prepared remarks.
Mr. Buck, you have a question?
Thank you. So Nick, if I'm hearing correctly, we can make homeowners change their lead service. Is that what I'm hearing? Unless we have an ordinance.
Correct. We'd have to have an ordinance in place that would make a requirement. And we have some drafts from other communities that have already gone through this process. Again, it helps encourage those that have lead services to do it. As we've gone through this grant program, trying to encourage participation, some of the feedback we've gotten are, some individuals have been in their homes for 30 or 40 years and raised a number of kids and said that the lead didn't impact them. So why should they go through the process? But as we all understand, now's the time to get it out of the system. So,
And I think maybe a bigger issue is when somebody has lead service and they didn't want to replace it and they sell their home to somebody else.
mm-hmm.
And they might have a different stance on it. So I certainly would like to look at an ordinance for next year.
Yeah, and we definitely want to take advantage of any funds that are available for the private side. I'd hate for that to dry up and then we're in a situation where private owners have to actually pay for that replacement.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you. Nick, most of the, but not all of the lead pipes, water pipes, are in the private services, right? Is that, or does the utility still have lead in feeder lines or not main line? I don't know what else to call them. But the utility doesn't have any of those outstanding, do they?
Correct, yeah. I mean, just at a hierarchy, we have our wells to the treatment facility, there's pipes that interconnect them, and then from the treatment facility to the home, there are pipes. And the water mains, which are, run down the center of the road, and all of those upstream are not lead.
Speaking of which, yeah, that's the.
So just to be sure, it's the service to the house. So it's from the middle of the road, if you will, roughly somewhere in the road to the house, or the only point where there's lead services. So if you or I are neighbors, and I have a lead service and you don't have a lead service, you should not have any impact from the lead that's in my service to your house.
So you're saying basically, by the way, does any of this, I know the water flows theoretically one way from the main line to the house, or from the street to the house.
Mm-hmm.
But is there any contamination of the lead from that, or from the private services that are getting into those lines? I mean, do the main lines have any lead in them at all?
No, it's just a service.
One last thing, that you talked about, and I agree, we should probably have an ordinance that says that when we're replacing or there are lines with the city does or the county does or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But would it also be something to maybe start, we still have a grant program.
Correct.
Would it be possible to include in that ordinance something about if they participate in the grant program, or if they get rid of the lead services, that will give them a little more money under the grant if they do it by a certain time, by a date certain? Can we speed it up that way?
You mean as far as giving the customer a premium above what the cost is?
No, not above what the cost, because they don't pay 100% of the cost. It's only a $500 grant, isn't it?
No, I apologize, I didn't put that in my remarks. I think the sanitary side might be the $500, but the water side through the DNR program, this last iteration, we were giving $4,500.
$4,500.
Yeah, so I was, my water
up to $4,500, it may not cost that much.
Yeah, up to, yes. And the water manager indicated.
All right, I was under the impression it was only $500.
Yeah, it's $4,500, and we are asking, as we look forward, we're looking to increase it because we've been hearing that there's price increases coming through, so that try to get the DNR to provide more funds, so that 95% of all the services that are replaced are 100% covered.
Is there any money in the infrastructure bill for water utilities?
There is in the infrastructure bill and the Build Back America, there's other items in there. However, a lot of those, from what I've seen, at least on the public side, is flowing through like the safe drinking water and more given out as a loan than a forgivable principal forgiveness as it is on the private side.
Okay, well,
there's lots of funds out there that are rolling through, and we're monitoring those at the utility, trying to figure out which ones we can apply for, and which ones make sense to help, put us in the best position.
okay. Thank you.
Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. I'm slightly more than a year out from having done mine. I got a couple of questions related to this, though, and I think it's probably things that are important for the public to understand. You said there were 2,411 water services that was public and private, meaning If you have a lead service that goes from the water main to the house, that's actually two services.
Correct, it's counted as two.
Yep, the public side to the box that turns everything off, and then the private side beyond.
Mhm.
You don't know every service of every house in the city, though, is that correct?
We know every house, I guess the private side, we did an inventory when we did the AMI. On the public side, the part that's in the roadway and such, we didn't physically identify every one of them. However, we scoured our records. We're annually required to do PSC reports to the state. And we scoured those and luckily, the individual that filed the report actually hand wrote lead on some of them to help us know which ones were lead and which ones weren't. And then we also spent a considerable amount of dollars 2 years ago, starting 2 years ago, and then last year, where we broke the city into basically 4 quadrants. And what we did was every year that a service was, so let's say 1972, we went to each quadrant and we vacuum excavated in the terrace down to figure out what the material type was of the service. And we were able to use that along with the paper records that I mentioned to determine what years we believe that we transitioned from lead to other material types.
Okay. I only ask because, again, about a year and a half ago when I had questions, there was no record of my place. At that point, you did have to do the vacuum excavating to identify, because the basement walls were just too thick to identify what was coming in through the wall. So that is an option if you don't know, or if the owner doesn't know, you could have that vacuum excavated, which is a fairly painless and I believe free procedure to determine what that service is, correct?
Yeah, I guess I have to talk with you offline on the particulars on that one. I guess on the on the private side, the customer side, the property owner side, I believe we have pretty solid records on what's coming into the house.
Okay.
It is possible that the material type changed outside the house. You know, for instance, it was lead at one time, for whatever reason, the portion outside the wall was replaced, but they didn't replace the piece going through the wall.
Okay. Is there any concern with galvanized? Because that's another material that was brought up when I had mine done. They thought it was galvanized, it turned out to be lead, but is there a concern with galvanized?
Galvanized is something as well. We didn't find any records on the utility side, and those on the customer side, we believe a lot of those were changed over the years because galvanized was a failure or to prematurely leak.
And do those galvanized also, are they also eligible for the grants?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And is there an issue if a house is identified with lead service? Is there an issue potentially with the sale of that house? Is that something that has to be documented on a sale record or?
That's a great question. I'll have to get back to you on it.
Okay, because I think that as a private resident, yeah, I may have had lead all my life and my kids grew up and everybody's fine and I don't want to be worrying about it. But at the same time, I have to, in the back of my mind, think at some point, it's going to be a ding when I'm trying to sell it. So
Yeah,
that would
yeah.
be the thought. And then you did mention a little bit regarding the grant. I'm surprised it went up quite a bit from a year ago. But no. I do know, and if Sam were here, I'm sure he'd be happy to speak up. Sam Warp from Wastewater does offer $1,000
1,000, yeah.
grant. At least it was, maybe that went up too, who knows? But yeah, between the two, and you know, as a person who, you know, my sewer line was fine. It was clay, but it was fine. But having lived in a different house where it wasn't fine and having to pay for the whole stupid thing myself, I was really happy to have it just done all at once because it's the same holes and basically it follows the same trench. So I would encourage anybody to take advantage of those opportunities. And if they needed loan options, are there options with some of the banks in town you're aware of?
Yeah, we actually have partnered with Forward Bank. So what they'll do is they'll help. So if you apply and you get accepted to have your lead service replaced, you go through the process of having the contractor replace it. They'll submit a bill to you as a property owner. You have to pay that bill and then submit it to the utility. We verify that all the replacement's been done. And then it goes to the DNR. The DNR cuts a check back to the city gets it back to the property owner. So it's quite a process. It takes about 2 months for the check to come back. We recognize that some individuals may not be able to carry that amount of, pay for the invoice, a couple $1,000s for the few months. We work with Forward Bank and they'll work with you to cover you during that period of time. And then if it's in excess of what the grant is, they'll do a low interest loan to you for the difference.
Okay. One last quick question I had in my notes here. Do you foresee any mandatory replacement requirements from the state level?
It's a great question. There's a lot of, spotlights on lead service replacement right now. And the EPA is looking at trying to change they are changing some of the guidelines. So I think it's just a matter of time before there's gonna be more and more requirements. I think it's gonna, if it does come, it's gonna be more from the federal level through the EPA.
So the moral of the story is it's likely to come. Do it now while you got the money available. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I see Tom popped on, maybe he knows the dollar amount for the sewer. Maybe not. Just on that note, I think one thing, we are working with Public Works and the sewer, Tom and his team to try to coordinate. So if a customer has a lead service that needs to be replaced, to also try to replace the sewer lateral at the same time, as you mentioned.
Any other questions for Nick? Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Item F is council president's comments. Number one is employee recognitions. Jamie Kaiser at the police department has been here for 10 years. Congratulations, Jamie. Second thing that I wanted to comment on today is I was reading the newspaper this morning and noticed that you can take out papers from the city clerk's office for running for various city offices, one of which is the mayor, which currently is vacant. So if you'd like to be sitting in this chair, contact the city clerk's office. And the third thing I wanted to do is wish everyone a safe and happy Thanksgiving. Thank you. Item G is council comments. Any council comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item H, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. I believe there are any of those. Item I is the consent agenda, which you have before you, and recommended action is to approve the consent agenda. Mr. Rosen did your motion.
Motion to approve.
Okay, and a second from Mr. Wagner. Is there any comments on the consent agenda? Seeing none, please vote. That motion carries unanimously. There were no items removed from the consent agenda, so we'll move to item K, which is a presentation of the 2022 Economic Development Strategic Plan presented by Josh Miller, Development Services Director. Josh.
Thank you. I selected the wrong thing here. All right. So I'm here tonight to present the 2022 Economic Development Strategic Plan. This plan process goes back a number of years. We've been talking about it for a while. Strategic planning has been kind of a buzzword for a while in both the city and Economic Development Board. And so we've been, originally we were working with Nancy Turek with UW Extension, and she was kind of facilitating that with the EDB. And then we decided to do a economic development community survey, which we sent out back in 2019. And we had a good response rate, actually. It was an online survey, and we had about 975 people respond. And just had a lot, probably, I forget how many questions there were, but a number of questions relating to what type of businesses, what do they want to see in the community, where do you want to see the community grow? And so we had really a good, and this is not me doing this. I don't know what's going on the screen. I'm not that, oh. I don't know what I'm doing. All right, thanks. So we had a good response rate, and that was kind of really the what led us to go down the path that we were with the strategic plan. We had the intention of picking this up in early 2020. Obviously, we know what happened then. And we got on to other things in this past year. We worked on a couple TIF districts into the city subdivision. And but we worked hard with the Economic Development Board to develop, I think, a pretty solid and sound strategic plan based on a number of key principles that are pretty widely known, not just in Marshfield, but in the state. The EDB had suggested that we go to the other economic development partners. So we went to the bid board, we went to Mackey, we went to visit Marshfield, Main Street Marshfield, and the seed committee was Wood County. and the CDA. So we talked through, and in some cases, we went to a few presentations because they wanted some additional feedback. So this just isn't my plan or the Economic Development Board's plan. This is got some acceptance across different entities in the community. So with that, I'll just kind of go over it. Nothing too fancy in a PowerPoint. The content is what's important, not the design. So the first one is three different goals. So the first goal is ensure housing is meeting the current and future needs of residents and area workforce. The objective is to identify priorities and opportunities for quality, attractive housing. And some strategies to help achieve that goal is open up single-family residential lots, establish affordable housing program focusing and utilizing TIF housing affordability extensions, develop a housing strategic plan that includes mixed-use TIF district opportunities and begin implementation, and support redevelopment efforts with a priority on bringing in new housing into the downtown. Some of these things that you'll notice we've actually begun. We've actually got to start on some of these things. And also a number of these things tie into the READY plan, which was a plan done by Wood County. And they got a grant, a USDA grant to develop the county strategic plan. And so some of these things dovetail nicely in with what the county is trying to do. So goal 2 is support efforts to bring or expand quality of place features and amenities to Marshfield. The first objective is to identify desirable amenities and business mix for the community with the following strategies: identify gaps in Marshfield's quality of place and consumer experience, determine target audience demographics and current future workforce needs, support efforts to bring in new recreational and cultural amenities such as art installations, bike trails, and winter sports facilities, support efforts to bring in new retail, restaurants, and entertainment businesses, and support promotion and tourism efforts that align with the city's economic development strategies and plans. Objective 2 of that goal is to support efforts to enhance the downtown to make it more attractive for businesses, consumers, and residents, with first strategy being continue to support Main Street in their efforts to retain and bring in new businesses when those efforts align with the strategic plan, action plan, and downtown master plan and other long-range plans in the community. And finally, goal 3 is to attract and grow business and workforce. First objective is to develop a robust entrepreneurial ecosystem in the area. This is one of the things that one of the 4 strategies in the READY plan is really focusing on entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so that's kind of where this came from, but we think it's very important. The first strategy is to support local and regional efforts to develop maker spaces, incubators, and similar facilities to support entrepreneurial efforts, and then investigate opportunities for regional partnerships. Objective 2, attract people and new desirable businesses to the area with the following strategies: identify targeted industry sectors and promote available industrial and commercial land. Objective 3 is to retain existing businesses and support expansion efforts with the following 5 strategies: ensure that there is adequate land available for future business growth. We talked about in TID 12, we just are in the process of acquiring the industrial land for that. That was 20 years in the making. So the council at the 20 years ago had the foresight to get an option on that land. So we've got that land, we're getting that land, and then where's the next area of growth? So we want to be able to plan for that. Next strategy is conduct business retention and expansion visits and develop a follow-up plan. Next one, support efforts to continue to maintain and expand the city's infrastructure for future growth. Engage the employers to find out what they feel is desirable for attracting and retaining quality employees to the area, and then develop an economic incubator dashboard for decision-making. And finally, the last objective is identify and support economic development and redevelopment opportunities, develop a redevelopment plan for West 2nd Street corridor, and then conduct assessment of what organization/structure needs to be in place for effective economic development and redevelopment, and work towards that structure and improve communication amongst economic development partners. So that's a lot of stuff to throw at you. So at this point, just kind of interested in any feedback that the council might have. We reviewed this with the Economic Development Board at their last meeting, talked kind of through the process, what we've gone through to get here so far. And just like the city's plan, there's no defined time limit on this plan. There are a number of time frames that we're working with, probably some of them pretty aggressive. but that doesn't mean we're gonna get everything done within, the first 2 years of this plan. And we'll continue to monitor it. One of the things that the Economic Development Board asked of me was provide quarterly updates. And so, okay, what are we working on? What are we getting done? That helps keep us accountable at staff level and keeps the Economic Development Board in the know. And so if we're falling short somewhere, we can focus some of our energies and resources on some of those areas that we need to get caught up on. So happy to take any feedback. It really, this isn't a required document to get adopted. We weren't really sure exactly if this had to be something the council wants to approve or adopt. We just have accept and place on file, but in the future, if the council wants to have more buy-in or more weigh-in, we can certainly take this back and make changes to it. Happy to do whatever the council's pleasure is, but at this point, the Economic Development Board did accept and support this plan, and we'd be looking for kind of the same thing from the council.
Mr. Fisher, motion.
Thank you, Council President. I'm going to make a motion to accept and place on file.
Second by Mr. Butke. Is there any discussion or questions for Josh? Okay, please vote. Mr. Hendler. That motion carries unanimous. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
I think you're still up there.
Yep.
This is a long one for me.
I'm
to
sorry.
read.
Can you have a drink?
First reading of ordinance number 1467, a request to rezone property parcel 250-2603-333-0983 from CMU Community Mixed Use to MR24 Multifamily Residential for the following legally described area. Lot 4 of certified survey map number 10927, volume 45, page 179, document number 118673, located in the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter of section 33, town 26 north, range 3 east, city of Marshfield, Marathon County, Wisconsin. Thank you, Josh. And you're up.
Thank you. I do have to ask Attorney Wolfram if we can shorten those up on our agendas, and I won't put him on the spot right now, but I know we'll want to take care of that. So this is the first reading of an ordinance to rezone a property. This is a kind of a triangular piece of property behind the Walmart and the SC Swiderski apartment complex. This piece of property was at one point owned by a commercial investment company, and then they turned it over to the city, and we were able to transfer it to Swiderski, which is an adjacent property owner, in the hopes that they developed it. We do have a development agreement with them. In order to develop it appropriately, similar to what they're probably doing on site there in residential style housing or just residential development, they would need to rezone this property, or it would have to be a conditional use, but it's much more fitting to have it zoned matching what their existing properties are. So it's about a 3.3 acre piece. They more than likely would have to come back for a conditional use because they're looking at doing multiple buildings back there. And so we reviewed this with the Plan Commission last week. There was a public hearing held and there was no public comments. This does line up with the comprehensive plan. This is an area considered to be high density residential in the future land use plan, and it would be fitting with the neighborhood. It had been a commercial piece for 20 years, and they simply couldn't sell it for commercial because it was tucked back too far behind Walmart and the hotel there. So really didn't have any good visibility from the street. So ultimately, this seems like a highest and best use possibility for high density residential. So with that, I take any questions, but we'd be asking for final action on December 14th.
Anyone have any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number M. A request to authorize staff to execute an agreement for realty services for the marketing and sale of residential units in Daniels Edition, presented by Josh Miller, Development Services Director.
Thank you. So earlier the EDB meeting this month, we were giving an update on the city subdivision, and through that discussion, it was advised that the city get a realtor on board ASAP, basically as quickly as we could. The infrastructure is nearing completion, should essentially be done next week, I believe, with the electrical utility getting done. But the street, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, water, pretty much everything else is ready to go, just kind of finalizing a couple things. The corn is off, so we basically have a ready-to-build subdivision. And we do have a couple of offers in the process of closing, so a couple lots should be closed here the next week or so, in anticipation of another one probably before the end of the year. So the Economic Development Board said we're far along. We've got 14 lots pre-sold. We have another one just waiting on the paperwork for a pre-sale. So we'd have 15 lots pre-sold by next week, and leaving 8 lots remaining. And to be quite honest, those 8 lots, there are probably three or four of them front Lincoln Avenue, just with the new project and the reconstruction of the street. They're in a couple of years, and makes it probably a little more challenging to sell. They're not as, I mean, they'll sell, but they're not the first ones to go, obviously. And then the other ones are in the corner on the northwest side of the subdivision, a little bit smaller. So it'll take a little bit, probably more marketing effort to get those sold, and simply staff just doesn't have the time or resources to do that. So we put together an RFQ. We've done these before for realtor services. And we send basically the RFQ out to all the offices in town and ask them to share that information with other staff and other realtors in the office. And we got a couple of good feedback right away from some of the realtors, but we ultimately ended up with 2 responses, formal responses for this. And first one was from Century 21, from Sue Decker and her team, and then the other one was from Ashley Frederick from Next Home Realty, Hub City Realty. And both proposals were very strong. I've worked with both of those individuals and both of those firms, and have a great relationship with both of them, and I think they would do a tremendous job. But when reviewing the proposals, we felt that the one from Ashley was a bit stronger. She put a little more detail into the process and what she wanted to do with marketing, and a little more background information and her experience with building and construction side of things, so she knows that part of it. And Sue Decker, she does have, she sits on our Housing Rehabilitation Committee, so we do work with her at a committee level as well. So again, both quality firms, so I don't think we could go wrong, but from a staff level, after our review, we felt our recommendation would be with Ashley. And Ashley does have, she's been coming to Economic Development Board meetings for a number of years, really championing really this project, essentially saying this is a need. So I think she has a good understanding of what's going on in the community for, new construction, new housing, and so that was really kind of what we were, kind of the direction that the staff was recommending. So we would be looking to just do, I could kind of go over a little bit what was being proposed. So typically what we have in a real estate contract for vacant land is usually at an 8% commission, because we did an RFQ and there's competition. They wanted to try to get the project, so they're proposing a 6% commission. So that's a benefit to the city. Really proposing a larger sign on there, like you see before in subdivisions. You've got a big sign showing the lots that are available, getting it on the MLS, and that's really the critical piece that we can't do at a staff level. Even if I did get my realtor's license, Mrs. Spiros, I still could not have access to the MLS, and I could not put that information on there. I would need to work under a broker. So, and that's really where we talk about people coming into the community. How do they know what lots are for sale if you're not from around here, you're not used to the city website? You wouldn't, because we don't have things on the MLS. If you're curious like me, I sit on realtor.com on my app on the weekends sometimes just to see what houses are available, and these lots will never be on there without a realtor. So it's important that we get that out there. And then obviously doing the social media things, we do have a communications department, which we could do, but it's just having someone with that expertise is invaluable. So I think it's important at this time. I think we're at a good spot. People can see that there's a road in there. They can see that there's a subdivision. I've gotten a lot of compliments on the speed of the project, and thanks to Tom and Dan and his team for getting this stuff going as quickly as it did. But I think we're to a point where it's just easier, it'll get sold faster and it'll be more efficient if we can get a Realtor on board, so. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions, but at this point, the city staff was recommending entering a contract with Next Home Hub City Realty with Ashley Frederick.
Mr. Fire, your motion. And a second for Mr. Fisher. Is there any discussion? Okay, we have a motion to authorize the staff to enter into a contract with Next Home Services. Seeing no further discussion, please vote. That motion carries with one abstention.
Thank you.
Item N is a request to approve a joint statement with other community organizations for Marshfield being a welcoming community, presented by Steve Bargs, City Administrator. Steve, welcome. Hold on, you're muted somewhere. I'll try it. Eng is checking, Steve.
It's not showing me as muted on my screen.
Oh, no, it was a little loud, so
Okay, try it now.
try it now, Steve.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me all right? Yes, no?
We're trying to adjust the volume here.
Okay,
Okay,
try it.
that should be good, Steve.
Okay, everybody can hear me all right? All right, I'm gonna go ahead. Tell me if it doesn't sound okay. Going back earlier this year, I believe it was in May, I was contacted by a member of the community who was talking to some individuals and groups, trying to rally widespread support for a statement that would be adopted by different sectors of the city, the community, I should say, indicating that the city and all of its partners are a welcoming place to be, to come live, work, and play, so to speak. And then I kind of lost touch with it for a little bit, but it did continue to work behind the scenes. And recently, a statement that you have in your packet today that I'll read in a minute was adopted by the Mackey Board of Directors. It's also been approved by UWSP Marshfield campus, and I understand that Mid-State Technical College is looking at adopting it as well. It was crafted with the help of people over at Marshfield Clinic who are behind it also. The intent of this, again, is just to not indicate that we've had a problem in the past or that we're not a welcoming community, but just to make a statement proactively in this direction. So I'm going to briefly read it for those who may not be able to see it in the council packets, but it says, welcoming and embracing diversity brings new ideas, perspectives, and skills, and is essential for a prosperous community. As a community, we stand for inclusion and equality for all people from all walks of life. This enriches our daily lives, supports our community's growth, and is imperative to our future success. And what I want to make clear to the council in considering this tonight, in addition to the fact it's not a statement that we have some kind of problem, is that this does not obligate in any way, shape, or form the city to a particular action or position in the future with respect to any issue or request that might come along. Nothing of those types is involved in this whatsoever. With that in mind, I would recommend approval of the proposed statement.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Mrs. Spiros, you have a comment without a motion?
How will this be used? I mean, is it used in advertising? Is it, what, I don't understand exactly the purpose. or what it's gonna be used for?
That's a really good question, Rebecca. I've not been given any indication of that, aside from the fact that it was believed that a statement, again, representing education, medical, the business community, I guess the businesses are behind this through Mackey, and the city proper would be something that, you know, would stand for the fact that we are in fact a welcoming community. I've not been told that it's going to be used in advertising, promotion, or anything of that nature. I wouldn't be surprised if some did perhaps use it that way as a way of showing that we're open, but nothing has been given to me along those lines.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out what the purpose of, I can't, brain is not jumping to what the necessity was.
I don't think your mic's on. I don't think he can hear you.
I'm still, Steve, I was saying, I'm still trying to find the purpose of it though. What necessitated this being done?
Well, and again, Rebecca, you know, nothing necessitates this being done. If the council doesn't take action, life goes on. I think what they're just looking for is to have a statement that the various community groups, people involved in the city, you know, are signed on to this. If you want, I can certainly find out more about the intent of its use. Would it be in promotional materials? You know, Mackey adopted this at a board meeting that I think Josh was at as well last month, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them put it, you know, in some brochure or publication that's seen by people outside of the community looking to bring a business here or, you know, expand businesses here. I don't know that. I'd be happy to find out if you want more information. But like I said, what I got was a request for the city to consider this along with other groups.
Mr. Wagner.
Yeah, thank you. I share some of the same confusion that Mrs. Spiros shares. One person very close to me asked if you are a welcoming community, why do you have to tell people? That it's sort of like back years ago, I was preparing an economic development brochure, and one of the staff writers under me wrote a paragraph that said, "In this community, you will find no good old boy network." I about died, because if you don't have one, why mention it? You know, why deny it? So, I mean, it was, I feel the same way here. I feel like what we're gonna be judged on is how welcoming we really are. But the people who come into the community and wanna see it, when they look around, do they feel welcome or not? I don't think a statement like this really does anything except to say, you have a past that says you need this, you know, and I don't want that question asked. So I think maybe, if somebody can give us a better example, maybe the best thing to do at the time would be to table it until something new comes up about it, until somebody wants to come and explain it to us a little better. So,
I'm totally fine.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm totally fine. I'm totally fine with that. You make a really good point, Ed. Rebecca makes a really good point. That's why in my comments, I tried to make it clear that, that we need to be direct about this. If in fact you do embrace it and approve it at some point, that this is not the signal that we're trying to respond to some kind of a problem or a failure or something that we're not doing right today. Or that we're not obligated, like I said, to any future decisions or positions. But the question I get it loud and clear is, well, you know, okay, so then what is the purpose? What will it be used for? And if you want to table it, I can certainly bring it back when I have more information at a later time.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Council President. I was actually going to make a motion to table this until, I'm going to postpone. I'm going to postpone it until whoever initiated the statement can give us a better presentation. No offense, Steve, but I want to know from the person who originated the statement why they feel this statement needs to be approved. That would help me understand much better how to vote.
I think that's perfectly appropriate, and I'm not sure if it'll be the originator or or one of the proponents, but somebody who can speak to it and address those questions, I think it's very worthwhile to do that. So I'm in favor of what you're saying.
Mr. Fisher, your motion.
I think I just stated my motion, but I'll state it again. I'll make a motion to postpone until someone who originated the statement or a person who is advocating the statement can give a presentation to better explain the purpose.
And second by Mr. Wagner. Mr. Witzel, you have a comment.
Thank you. I would also like to better understand the previous statement that had been approved by this body that was referenced in the public comment period. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to postpone indefinitely. Well, we don't know until when at this point. We'll postpone until we can retain more information. Is there any further comment? Seeing none, please vote. That motion carries. Item O is a request to approve uploading council committee meeting videos to Facebook after the meeting has adjourned, presented by Steve Barr, City Administrator. Steve.
Thank you. We had an extensive discussion, actually a couple of them back earlier this year. We had Facebook Live that we were using for our council and committee meetings and getting a fair audience, but we ran into the concern of whether or not we could prevent comments being made during the meeting and scrolling on the screen. And ultimately, we found out that we were unable to prevent that through Facebook, raised concerns of the participation in a meeting not being confined to the public comment period, distractions that occur from seeing comments being made on the screen during a meeting and how that might impact the meeting itself, those types of things. So the council voted correctly, in my opinion, that to stop that practice. What's happening now is Tom Laux, our communications director, has indicated that without using Facebook as one of the avenues to get out the meeting videos, we have lost some of our viewership. Not surprising. That's a tool that's used by many people today. So he suggested that he'd like to see if it's possible for us to upload the meeting videos to Facebook following the conclusion of the meeting. So there would be comments. People would comment on what they're seeing and hearing at the meeting as they're watching the video, and those would come into us, but it would not be the concern that we faced earlier with real-time comments coming onto the screen and affecting the meeting itself and really seeming to be inappropriate on the screen during a public meeting. So it would be similar to how we upload other videos to our other platforms to make sure that people can see them after the fact. And I feel that that's appropriate, but we've had enough discussion and enough sensitivity on this topic that I bring it to the body tonight for consideration. So my recommendation would be that we authorize Tom Laux, the communications director, to upload council and committee meeting videos to Facebook following the conclusion of those meetings.
We have a motion to that. Or any discussion? Okay, we have a motion now from Mr. Varsho. And what's your motion, Brian?
Sorry, to approve the upload for after the meetings to Facebook.
Okay, and a second by Mr. Rosendich. Mr. Witzel, you have a comment.
Thank you, Council President. Couple quick questions, and I don't know if Steve, you can answer these or we need to have Tom answer these, but one of the questions I have regarding comments in the past when we did run these on Facebook and there was the fairly successful method of removing those comments as they came in. Once the meeting was concluded, was there anything done regarding comments, and did we see comments coming in at that point, and how were those comments handled after the meeting was concluded? Do we have any idea on that?
I don't necessarily know the answer to that. It was a struggle trying to keep up. What they were trying to do is manually remove comments as they came in, and that was pretty difficult to keep up with. After the meetings, if they ran the videos again, I guess I don't know the answer to whether comments were received and posted. We do have, though, I mean, the possibility that people are going to do that. And the fact of the matter was, as I understood it, is the impact on the meeting itself. And the city attorney had raised concerns too about having that participation coming in from the outside during the discussion. I see Thomas at the podium, so I'll let him address it.
All right, just so I understand your question, it's the comments after the meeting on Facebook when we were doing that.
Yep,
we
so in other words, you're running Facebook Live and people can comment during the meeting and they can put their little hearts or whatever emojis they want on there. But then the meeting's done. You're not taking the video down, it sits there and anybody then a week, 2 weeks, a month later can watch and comment.
That is correct. And back then, we did not remove comments after the meeting on Facebook.
And so there would be no expectation or there would be no change. Now the video would be uploaded instead of it being live and you having to worry about little heart emojis as it's happening. Whatever happens after it's posted, there'd be no change.
No change.
I guess the only other question I have, since you're here, and maybe you can help with this as well, is there an advantage to uploading to Facebook rather than simply putting a link to our already established YouTube channel platform?
A lot of people don't want to leave Facebook when they're scrolling. And when you click a link, like our YouTube link or our Telview link, it takes them away from Facebook. And generally that eliminates more views using it.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's all I
so
need.
I would say Facebook is better.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Fisher.
I'm gonna possibly muddy up the water a little bit, but can someone remind me why comments coming in during the meeting were inappropriate?
So, first of all, what we had was, there was a simultaneous posting while the meeting was going on, and that becomes content of the meeting. And then at the same time, if you start to remove those, you've opened it up as a public forum and you're now taking things off because they're coming in simultaneously. And then another group, after the fact, posting or not removing them. So there's a problem because it creates a public forum. And then the other problem is we have a meeting content that's going on where you're not keeping track then a record of the meeting. That Facebook, because it's all live, is actually part of the meeting. The other problem that comes with some of this, and this would be up to you folks, is simply that, if people are on there and they're commenting, the question is, are you getting that feedback? When are you getting that feedback? Coming in simultaneously, I'm concerned or was concerned that it's simultaneous to the meeting itself and it becomes part of that meeting content.
Okay, but if I may follow up. I guess the question is, I mean, I understand, sounds like you were trying or attempting to hide those during the meeting. That's correct?
We were at the time.
Okay, at the time. First of all, why don't we just allow people to comment as the meeting is going? I mean, as an alderman, I can't see it because I'm not allowed to be on my phone. Why are we not allowing people to freely be able to express their views and thoughts?
Again, the big concern was that it was coming on simultaneously and it becomes part of that meeting and a discussion going on. Part of that then is that as it's being displayed, whatever that information is, whether it's misinformation, other information, and we had some, if you recall at one point in particular, this was an issue where people were coming in and saying something about, how something happened, who said what, and it wasn't accurate, and it's happening simultaneous to the meeting. It tends to create an atmosphere where that becomes content of the meeting. People that don't know that that isn't accurate then are getting that as part of your public meeting presentation. And there's a concern about the misinformation and the fact that there's no opportunity to comment about it.
Is there a way, and this question is for Tom, is there a way to have a live video and not have comments?
YouTube is what we're doing now.
But I'm talking on Facebook. You do
No,
have Facebook.
not
So you
anymore.
can't have Facebook Live and not have comments. All right.
I will just chime in, it could change, but not at this moment.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, the motion is to authorize. Oh, Steve, sorry.
Thank you. So if I can just ask the city attorney question, just to kind of clarify too, one of the concerns was during the meeting, comments of a nature that could be, for lack of a better term, slanderous, or those types of things being part of the official meeting and the official record. Those kind of comments could still come in later after the meeting when Tom uploads the video. But that, however those are dealt with, that would be outside of the meeting itself, the meeting record, the meeting video, as it came in live in real time, and thus would not be the concern that it would be if it was happening live, right?
Yeah, correct. I think that that's different. And if you choose to do it that way, we've run into this problem. And if you recall at the time that we were going through this, some of you may not know, but we were having similar problems with other municipal-owned Facebook posts where you weren't able to control the content of it. It opens it up as a public forum. And then people going back and saying, well, that's false. And you made statements about people's employment, those sorts of things. It was problems elsewhere where that was happening. To let it happen while the meeting's being run, aired real time, really opened that door for a situation where you got a public misinformation circumstance. I think you also have to keep in mind, if you are doing this, that Facebook, once you run this and people can comment by Facebook, I think at that point, because this is a government entity, you've opened that up as a public forum. The rules associated with that are going to be whatever you provide for rules, but they are restricted because you can't control free speech. So you're going to be open to that. We were struggling and have struggled in the past in other departments, et cetera, that had their own Facebook comments to allow that to happen, where there were problems being able to control it. And the fact that that's happening simultaneously is even a greater concern, because there's no way to undo it. And it's something that everybody may be watching it for their raw piece of information, what's happening at the meeting. And when something comes in, there's just not a way to undo what's happening there. So once you do open that up, though, for those comments, then that's something you need to be aware of. The concern at times is that if it's a Facebook page, if it's this type of display of a video and there's comments, the question is, have you endorsed that statement because it's on your public post? It's on your public forum. You have to not infringe on that because there's free speech, but at the same time, you need to be worried about what is that statement doing? Is it representing a position? And we had that in the past where it was, this is what somebody said, when it wasn't accurate. And there's no way to undo that in real time.
Thank you.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Council President. So I'm going to ask this question just so anyone listening or watching this understands. So if I'm hearing you correctly, we're going to upload these videos to Facebook. And if a slanderous comment or a comment that we view as slanderous, we will, as a city, have the ability to remove that. Is that?
I don't know. That's going to be a job for somebody to try to make that determination. The question of whether something's slanderous may be very difficult to determine, because slanderous means by its very nature that it's defaming and also untrue. So I don't know about a slanderous comment, but if it would be something terribly, terribly inappropriate, presumably you can do that. But this issue is one, again, that I represent other municipalities, so I've had to deal with this elsewhere, where you have, for example, and I'll use a sheriff's department, police department, fire department, and there becomes an engagement in misinformation being used and posted. The question is, where do you make that decision to remove posts? It's a difficult question, because you're fighting against free speech and you're fighting against government misinformation, depending on what your response to that is.
If I may follow up, Council President, thank you. I guess my concern is a few things here. One, I don't ever like to, none of us are always going to agree, but I think everyone has a right to speak their piece. And I don't like the idea of infringing on people's right to say what they feel, even if I disagree with that. With that said, if I do get concerned at the thought of us removing comments, because I think you open the door then for people to view the city as being not transparent when you're removing comments. And I don't want to go down that, that trail either. And so I feel like, honestly, I feel like we are going backwards and we're not actually solving the problem. I'm not against putting it on Facebook. I would actually prefer we have it on Facebook, and I'd prefer to let people comment as they wish, and hope that common sense would prevail if someone makes a very inappropriate comment. But at the end of the day, if the city is going to start removing comments, that really does concern me, because I think it opens the door for a very negative impression of this institution. Thank you.
And if I might just.
Go ahead.
What that really comes down to is a question of policy. And it is one, it's probably gonna rest with Tom at this point, assuming you go back to doing this. And you have to develop a policy that you can defend as not being restrictive on First Amendment speech rights. You could take a policy that, hey, we're not responsible for whatever anybody posts, but you better be prepared for what that means, because we have a world right now that could be particularly volatile in regard to some things that people could say. And I mean that in the sense that that means the door is wide open if you don't have a policy and don't take on a course of restricting that. Any type of statement could be posted and you have to leave it on your page, and that becomes part of your presentation. And there's just no answer around that except for policy. And, you know, again, if Tom develops that or whatever, and it can be run by the body here, but those are decisions that will have to be made, and they're not easy ones because I've had to look at this multiple times in the past.
Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. Does our Facebook page have a disclaimer?
I don't believe so, no.
So if I'm understanding, any comments that are put on there could be viewed as endorsed by the city.
I didn't look at it that way because they're comments by a citizen on a platform that's our platform, but we don't, I mean, I'm gonna say we don't have an official social media policy. We've brought it through committee several times, but I believe it hasn't gone any further. I think that's where it needs to go.
Okay, because I've seen on some Facebook pages, and it eludes me because quite frankly, I've tried to avoid Facebook lately. But I've seen on some Facebook pages a disclaimer. The comments made are not endorsed by the city. These are comments by citizens, just so that it's pretty clear that we are giving an open forum. People are able to speak what they want to speak, but we don't necessarily agree. You know, if somebody were to put some kind of, well, I don't even know where to go with it, some horrific comment that we're not standing by those comments. You know, we just got done discussing the need for, or the potential need for a statement that says, hey, we're all, you know, happy, and do we need that statement if we're not happy? I mean, it's going down a weird path, but I guess if we had a disclaimer that just somehow identified that these comments are not necessarily endorsed by the city, these are public, you know, this is a public forum, and these are, you know, private citizens making comments, something along those lines, I would feel better, because I think then it prevents us from being misunderstood as an entity.
I agree, and I will look into it and check other municipalities through the League of Municipalities and call. And I also check our other Facebook pages that are done by our PD and our fire, see how those are done as well.
Mr. Budke.
Thank you. This is maybe for Hap and Tom. What's the difference? We have citizens' comments here, you know, at the start of the meeting. We don't allow people to get up and start commenting during the meeting. So what is wrong with, and I want input from citizens, don't get me wrong, but they could comment at the end of the meeting, or they could come for the next meeting under citizens' comments and do that. So what is the difference? Why is there a special where they can, I know it's easy to sit back and write comments during a meeting, but we don't allow that here. If they have an opportunity under citizens' comment.
Yeah, I'm not sure what your question is. You're looking at me. I know that you're expecting something from me, but I mean, if your question is why do that, that's up to you. That's up to whether you do that this
Well,
way or
right,
not.
but that's my point. Why don't we do that? Because like I said, we don't allow people, citizens to come up here during the meeting to express their views. But if we're doing it on Facebook or some other media, we're talking about allowing that. And they do have opportunities under citizens' comments or at the end of the meeting. To me, it's an easy fix, but you're saying half that's our choice.
Right, it's your choice, and frankly, the reason this is in front of you here tonight is because what Tom is saying and has said, and please, if I speak different than your position, then let me know. But the idea was that if we're gonna, that there was more presence, that there was people utilizing the programming when we put it on Facebook. And unfortunately, when you do it on Facebook, they can comment. There's no way to stop that. We previously had made that decision not to do it in real time because of the concerns that I had, that then you've got a real question as to whether that's not part of your meeting content, et cetera. Another part of that concern was that while we have a rule that you can't be looking at your, computers and stuff here, we had people that were remotely participating. So you run the risk that somebody says, somebody looked at something that was outside the scope of this when they were making decisions and it was not part of the record. So it's just a matter of keeping the record was what I was worried about. That's not the case if you run this after the fact, so I don't have a problem with that. But whether you want to do it because of the comments, that's up to this body to decide.
I'm going to give Mrs. Spiros an opportunity to speak.
So in just listening to Hap and him explain, like, when the video is running live, it becomes part of our record. Facebook also has the ability to remove comments. Because it may violate their,
Community standards.
their standards. So this kind of addresses Adam's concerns too, if you're removing comments, or if Facebook is removing comments, does that destroy the record? Because they can. Facebook can remove them as the video is running.
So in this setting, we don't have that issue because you're only talking about doing it after the fact. No one's discussed doing that again live. And so that's part of that concern. If you're doing it, it's got to be fair. The one thing I think you got a sort of a safe harbor for the city is that if Facebook is removing it because it doesn't meet with what their requirements are, et cetera, we're not doing it as a government entity. We're in a very unique situation. A lot of people hearing this are probably thinking, well, what the heck? We have rules at work and they're, it's very controlled. An employer, a private employer, can control those things. The difference is we are government and we can't even tell our employees not to post something on Facebook, et cetera. That's not okay, whereas private employees or employers can do that. So it puts us in a unique position. So in the scenario that you're talking about though, unless we're the ones that are removing that content and Facebook would pull a post or something because it doesn't mean, I think we're off the hook because it was them that did it in terms of what might be pulled. When you're doing it otherwise, that's a concern. And I would mention, Tom, that if you're looking at those things, come back to me because I will tell you without any question, in the last 6 months, I have looked at this in other situations, talking about other municipalities and other departments here. And I will tell you without any question, my opinion is that there are other municipalities that are doing this wrong. What they're doing is illegal and would not stand up, meaning that they're removing things once they open that public forum. They're removing things for certain reasons that I don't think, if it was challenged, would be upheld. And I just want to be careful because, and I've said this in the past, just because somebody's doing it, somebody else has passed an ordinance or whatever, we need to be careful to just assume then that that's okay.
Mr. Fisher, you have an additional comment?
Thank you, Council President. So if I heard you correctly, there is no policy. We don't have a social media
We do
policy.
not have a social media policy. We have been planning to do that, but it hasn't gotten to this body.
I tried to push the button here to amend it, not letting me. So I'm gonna make a motion to amend, to postpone this until Tom can present a policy. Can you do that for me, Jessica?
Oh, it was there. Mr. Bucky, you seconded that? Okay. Is there comments or questions on the, Steve?
It's not really a comment on the motion itself, but I think that's wise. I don't think this uploading videos to Facebook after the meetings would add anything more potentially problematic to what we have right now. While we're having this conversation right now, people could be posting to the city's Facebook page saying that they don't like us and they think we make bad decisions or whatever. The main point is what you're getting at right now. We have taken runs at staff level before in terms of trying to put together a social media policy. As Tom said, we've had plenty of discussions about it. We just haven't got it to the point of being before this body for review and approval. We need to get there. So I think the motion is very wise.
I don't.
Any other comments on the amendment? Okay. So the amended motion, first we have to vote on the amendment, which is to add to that we postpone this until the policy is presented. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So let's vote on that. As soon as Jess gets here. Okay, we're ready to vote.
There you go.
And that motion carries, which I believe makes the second motion, or the original motion.
I don't think it wasn't actually an amendment. Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
just a point of clarification here. I think the motion to amend would be a motion that would precede the main motion. So I don't think it's actually an amendment, but it just tabled the thing until we get the.
and that's what I was getting at, is that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's no reason to vote on the main motion.
Thank you.
Because we're postponing it. But thank you for the help.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, which brings us to item P, a request to change the second council meeting date to December to Tuesday, December 21st, presented by Steve Barry. Steve.
Thank you. Historically brings you to change the second council meeting in December, moving it up a week. That's because I assume there's very little interest in having a council meeting right around Christmas, and that would be the case again now. So what we're proposing is that the second council meeting in December would be held on Tuesday, December 21st, 1 week after the previous meeting. The schedule for that night would be Judiciary and Licensing Committee at 5, Finance, Budget, and Personnel at 5:30, and Council at 6. In the past, we've had Plan Commission tucked in there too, but they've moved their December meeting up to Wednesday, December 15th. And really what we try to do, if you remember on the 21st, those of you who've been here in past years, to keep that agenda as light as possible, just simply the things that we need to take care of business, insurance renewals, those kind of timely items. You'll have just met a week earlier, and like I said, we'll be right into the holiday season. So I'd be looking for a motion of approval to move the second meeting in December to Tuesday, December 21st at 6 p.m.
Mr. Witzel, your motion.
I move to change the second council meeting in December to 12/21/21.
Okay, we have a second from Mr. Wagner. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. That motion carries. Item Q, a request to appoint Lyle Lang, 800 Mary Knoll Avenue, to the Fire and Police Commission to complete a vacant term ending in 2024. You have his letter of application in the packet, and Mr. Lang is here this evening and has indicated that he's willing to make a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Good evening, everyone. I want everyone to know I consider this a great honor to be considered for this appointment to the commission. I strongly believe in law and order, and I think that everyone in this room would agree that in order for our city to remain a viable community, both economically, socially, to attract more business, to attract new families, new talent, that strong law enforcement and public safety programs are essential. I think we could also probably agree that in order for our department heads and our men and women with their boots on the ground every day, in order for them to do their job appropriately and confidently, they need to believe that they have the support of our city officials and our community leaders. And so I would say that if I were appointed to this commission, I could help with that task. I would also say that my almost 40 years of business experience would bring a sort of pragmatic approach and practical sense to problem solving in our community as well. Thank you.
Mr. Varsho, your motion.
Motion to appoint Mr. Lang.
And we have a second from Mr. Rosendich. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. And that motion fails. Item R is a motion to adjourn to close session under Wisconsin statutes 19.85, paragraph 1, paragraph E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons are involved. Specifically, the proposed renewal of the Fairgrounds Management Agreement with the Central Wisconsin State Fair Board, and a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, paragraph 1C, considering employment, or this, I don't know, this applies, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, specifically an update on an employment claim against the city, and a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, paragraph G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved with, specifically a review of potential litigation against the city. Mr. Witzel, your motion.
To go into closed session.
Okay, Mr. Bucky seconds that. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. We'll take a few minutes recess to reset the room here. No, we covered all three. It's not on the agenda, so. Okay, we're ready? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Was that
So-
the Johnson or the?
You do it on the,
Oh,
okay, we have a motion for Mr. Fisher.
I'll make a motion to approve an extension to the Fairgrounds Agreement with Fairgrounds Association as presented.
Okay, and we have a second from Mr. Witzel. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Seeing none, please vote. And that motion carries. With it. We can change that. Okay. Item T, okay. Item U is suggested items for future agendas. Don't see any. Item V is a motion to adjourn by Mr. Witzel. Okay. And a second by Mr. Rosendich. All in favor? We are adjourned.